Her kids were denied food at the party, and their silent tears exposed the host's real face. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I'm Amanda Hayes, a single mom, and this is the night my children, Ethan and Lily, faced humiliation that I will never forget. It all started when I got an invitation from Vanessa Crawford, a woman I once considered a friend. She was hosting a birthday party for her daughter, Sophie, and she made it sound like the most perfect event. I wanted my kids to feel included, so I decided to go, even though I had a feeling Vanessa might not be welcoming. When we arrived, everything looked amazing. There were balloons, music, and laughter everywhere. At first, I thought maybe it wouldn't be so bad. But soon, I noticed Vanessa's attitude. She barely greeted us and acted as if we were invisible. I tried to ignore it, hoping it was just her personality, but then it got worse. The servers began handing out food, and I watched in shock as Ethan and Lily were completely ignored. Other kids were happily eating pizza and cake, while my children sat with empty plates. Lily, shy and polite, asked for some food, and Vanessa cut her off with a sharp comment about kids who don't belong here. My heart sank. I felt powerless, seeing my children humiliated for something they had no control over. Ethan and Lily didn't cry loudly. They tried to hide their tears, but I could see the hurt in their eyes. It was quiet, subtle, but it spoke volumes. I had never felt so angry and helpless at the same time. I knew I had to stay calm for my kids, so I smiled and told them we would leave soon. I whispered that this was not their fault and that they were loved, even if others couldn't see it. As we walked out, I promised myself I would not let Vanessa's cruelty go unanswered. I wanted my kids to know that being humiliated does not define their worth. I started thinking of ways to make things right, not just for them, but to show Vanessa that kindness and respect matter more than social games. That night left a mark on all of us. Ethan and Lily were hurt, but they also learned something important about resilience and dignity. I realized that people like Vanessa only have power if you let them. From that moment, I vowed to protect my children, to teach them that love and self-respect are stronger than cruelty. It wasn't just a party, it was a lesson. And even though it was painful, it became the night that sparked a plan to stand up, to fight back, and to make sure my kids never feel invisible or unworthy again. A few days after receiving a text from Vanessa Crawford, I found myself staring at the invitation for her daughter Sophie's birthday party. The message was full of excitement, promising a glamorous event with fancy decorations, games, and a big cake. Vanessa called it the party of the year, and I could feel her pride shining through her words. She made it sound impossible to miss. I hesitated for a moment. I knew Vanessa well enough to understand how particular she could be. She loved everything to look perfect and could be quick to judge anyone who didn't fit her idea of proper. But I also thought about Ethan and Lily. They loved birthdays, parties, and seeing other kids happy. I wanted them to have a good experience, even if it meant dealing with Vanessa's attitude. In my mind, the joy on their faces would be worth it. Before I agreed to go, I decided to ask a few questions. Ethan had been talking about his favorite snack for weeks, a small treat he rarely got, and Lily had dietary restrictions I had to consider. I texted Vanessa, politely asking if she could make sure there would be something my kids could eat. I tried to keep it casual, hoping not to seem demanding. Vanessa's reply came quickly, but it wasn't what I expected. She dismissed my concerns with a short, almost careless answer. "We'll have food, don't worry about it," she said, as if my children's needs were unimportant. There was no warmth in her words, just a polite brush-off. I felt a small knot of worry in my stomach, but I pushed it aside. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe everything would be fine once we arrived. I explained the plan to Ethan and Lily. I told them we were going to a fun party with balloons, cake, and games. Their eyes lit up immediately, and they started talking about what they wanted to do first. Seeing them so excited made me feel hopeful. I wanted this to be a happy day for them, even if it meant ignoring the little warning signs. I packed a small bag for each of them, making sure they had some water and snacks just in case. I tried to prepare, hoping nothing would go wrong, but a quiet worry stayed in the back of my mind. I reminded myself that it was supposed to be a celebration, not a test of patience. That evening, I told myself to focus on the kids. Their happiness mattered more than anything else. I drove to Vanessa's house with Ethan and Lily, keeping a smile on my face and telling myself that this was going to be a fun experience. Little did I know, This party would turn out to be the start of one of the hardest and most unforgettable nights of my life. When we arrived at the Crawford mansion, the house looked even more impressive than I had imagined. Large balloons floated in every corner, colorful streamers hung from the ceiling, and a table full of food and treats stretched across the dining room. Laughter and chatter filled the air, and the other kids were running around, excited and happy. From the outside, it seemed like the perfect birthday party. Ethan and Lily's eyes lit up immediately. They held my hands tightly as they took in the decorations and music. I felt a small sense of relief seeing them excited and smiling. For a moment, I thought maybe everything would go smoothly. But as soon as we walked up to the main room, I noticed something unsettling. Vanessa was standing near the food table, greeting guests and handing out party favors. She smiled at everyone, laughed at their jokes, and seemed perfectly friendly. But when our eyes met, her smile didn't reach her eyes. There was a coldness there that made my stomach twist. She barely nodded in our direction, and it felt as though we weren't really supposed to be there. Vanessa's daughter, Sophie, ran up to her, hugging her tightly and squealing with excitement. Vanessa responded warmly to her, but she kept her distance from Ethan and Lily. I tried to push down the worry rising inside me and reminded myself that we were just guests. Maybe I was imagining it. We walked further inside, and I tried to encourage my kids to join the other children in the games. Ethan hesitated, glancing at Vanessa for approval, while Lily clung to my side nervously. I could feel the tension in the air, though nothing had happened yet. Vanessa's fake warmth was like a thin mask, hiding something sharp underneath. Despite my unease, I told Ethan and Lily to enjoy themselves. I reminded them that they were there to have fun, and no one could take that away from them. Still, every time Vanessa looked in our direction, I caught a flicker of something I couldn't ignore: disdain, a subtle but clear message that we were not truly welcome. I tried to stay calm, keeping a polite smile on my face as we moved toward the other kids. But inside, I knew this party was going to be more complicated than I had hoped. That first moment of arrival made it clear that we were not just outsiders here. We were invisible in the eyes of the host. I held my children close, silently promising them that no matter what happened, I would protect them. It was a perfect setting with a perfect facade, but I could already sense the cracks beneath the surface. Something about Vanessa's behavior told me that this night would not be just another fun birthday party. It would be a test of patience, dignity, and strength for both me and my children. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came when it was time for food. Servers began carrying trays of pizza, sandwiches, and cake, moving from group to group, handing out plates with smiles. All the other kids eagerly grabbed their food and started eating, laughing and talking, enjoying themselves. But when they reached Ethan and Lily, they walked past without even noticing them. I watched in disbelief as my children sat there with empty plates, trying not to draw attention to themselves. I called Ethan over quietly, asking if he was hungry. He nodded, his face tight, trying to hide the disappointment. Lily, being the polite and timid girl she was, tried to ask one of the servers if she could have some food. That's when Vanessa stepped in. She gave a tight-lipped smile, her eyes cold, and said something I will never forget. "Maybe these aren't the kind of kids who belong here." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. My children froze, unsure how to respond, and I felt a wave of anger, shame, and helplessness all at once. How could someone be so cruel in front of other people? How could Vanessa make my kids feel unwanted just for being themselves? I wanted to stand up, to shout, but I knew that doing so in that moment might make the situation worse for Ethan and Lily. I looked around, hoping someone else had noticed, but most adults were either distracted or too polite to intervene. The other children didn't understand what was happening, and my heart broke seeing my kids left out while everyone else enjoyed the party. I could feel Ethan's shoulders slump and Lily biting her lip to hold back tears. Their silence spoke louder than any words. They felt humiliated and small, and it was all because of Vanessa's cruel judgment. I reminded myself to stay calm, to protect them from feeling worse. I whispered that it wasn't their fault, that they were loved and valued, and that one person's cruelty didn't define them. But inside, my mind raced with frustration. How could someone act so heartless in front of so many people? I felt a deep shame that my children had to experience such rejection, mixed with anger at Vanessa for thinking she had the right to treat anyone that way. I quietly decided we wouldn't let this break us. I would make sure Ethan and Lily knew they were strong and worthy, no matter what happened that night. The party was supposed to be a celebration, but it had turned into a painful lesson in cruelty and unfairness. Watching my kids sit there with empty plates, trying to hide their hurt, I promised myself that Vanessa's actions would not go unanswered, and that somehow we would find a way to rise above her meanness. Ethan and Lily sat quietly, trying to hide their tears, but I could see the hurt in their eyes. They didn't cry loudly or make a scene. They just looked down at their empty plates, their small hands fidgeting nervously. Every so often, Lily wiped a tear from her cheek, while Ethan's lip trembled as he fought to stay composed. Their silence was heartbreaking, and I felt a sharp pain in my chest seeing them humiliated for something they had no control over. Some of the other guests noticed. I saw a few eyes glance our way, curiosity and discomfort mixing on their faces. But no one stepped forward to help. Vanessa, on the other hand, smirked as she observed from a distance. She seemed satisfied, as if my children's humiliation was proof of her social power. Her smile was cold and calculating, meant to send a message to everyone around her. That she decided who belonged and who didn't. My heart broke in a way I hadn't expected. I had tried to shield my children from the world's cruelty, but in that moment, there was no escaping it. I realized that Vanessa's actions weren't just mean. They were deliberate, aimed at making us feel small and unworthy. The fact that this was happening in front of others, in a room full of people, made it even worse. I felt helpless, angry, and ashamed all at the same time, even though none of this was our fault. Their silent tears spoke louder than any words could. I could feel every emotion they were holding inside. The confusion, the pain, the embarrassment. It was raw and real, and it tore at me seeing the innocence of my children crushed by someone else's cruelty. I wanted to comfort them, to pick them up and take them away from this place, but I also knew I had to stay composed. I had to be their strength when the world was being cruel. I leaned down quietly and whispered to them that it wasn't their fault, that they were brave, and that I loved them more than anything. I told them that one person's cruelty didn't define them, and that their worth was far greater than the judgment of someone like Vanessa. But deep inside, I also felt a growing fire of determination. This moment of public humiliation could not stand. I promised myself that Vanessa's cruelty would not go unanswered, and that I would make sure my children never felt so powerless again. Watching them sit there, trying to hide their tears, I realized that this party had shown me two things: how cruel some people could be, and how much strength my children and I had when we stood together. Their silent suffering became a powerful reminder of the injustice we had faced, and it lit a spark inside me to fight back in a way that would protect them and teach a lesson Vanessa would never forget. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm in front of the other guests. My heart was pounding with anger, but I knew showing it wouldn't help Ethan and Lily. I had to protect them from feeling worse, so I kept my face neutral, smiling politely at people who tried to make small talk. Inside, though, my fury was building. I knelt down beside my children and whispered softly, "This isn't your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. I'm so proud of both of you." I held their hands and tried to comfort them, hoping my words would reach them through the pain and embarrassment they were feeling. They looked up at me with tired eyes, and I could see the mixture of sadness and trust. Even in that moment, they relied on me to be strong. After a few more minutes, I decided we couldn't stay any longer. I told Ethan and Lily we were going home, framing it as a way to get out of the crowd and enjoy something fun together instead. I collected their things, thanked the hosts politely, and walked toward the door, keeping my voice calm so my children wouldn't notice how angry I was. Every step felt heavy, knowing what had just happened, but I also felt a quiet determination forming inside me. As we left the party and stepped into the car, I let my emotions surface in private. I felt the sting of Vanessa's words and actions more fully now. This wasn't just a thoughtless act of rudeness. Her cruelty was deliberate, and it was personal. She had singled out my children in front of everyone, knowing it would hurt me and humiliate them. I realized that Vanessa's desire to appear perfect in front of others had crossed into malice, and it was clear she wanted to make a statement. I glanced at Ethan and Lily in the back seat, their little faces still heavy with disappointment. I silently promised them that this injustice would not go unpunished. I wouldn't stoop to cruelty, but I would find a way to respond that was fair and strong. I would show them that no one had the right to humiliate my children or make them feel less than they were. Driving home, I thought about what had just happened. The party, the empty plates, the cutting remark, everything added up to a clear message. Vanessa had tried to assert control and power over us, and she had failed to realize that we were stronger than her cruelty. That night, I knew I had to act, not out of revenge for revenge's sake, but to protect my children and reclaim our dignity. By the time we got home, I had already started forming a plan. Vanessa's actions had lit a fire in me, and I would make sure that my children would never feel powerless again. I reminded myself to stay calm, to be smart, and to turn this pain into something meaningful. The injustice we faced was only the beginning of a story that Vanessa would never forget. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about what happened at Vanessa's party. I knew I couldn't let it go, and I needed to make sure that my children's humiliation wasn't ignored. I started by looking through the texts and messages from Vanessa. Her responses were polite on the surface, but carried a dismissive tone that clearly showed she didn't care about my kids. I saved everything, knowing it could be important later. Next, I reached out to a few parents who had attended the party. Some had been subtly offended by Vanessa's behavior, and a few had even noticed how she treated my children. They were hesitant at first, not wanting to get involved, but when I explained how cruel Vanessa had been, they started sharing their own experiences. Many had been quietly hurt or embarrassed by her perfectionist demands, and they were relieved to finally speak up. I took notes of everything, gathering statements that showed a pattern in her behavior. I also scrolled through Vanessa's social media, looking for posts that could prove how she presented herself as flawless while subtly putting others down. I found photos from past events, captions, and comments that hinted at her tendency to humiliate people to protect her perfect image. Each post added more pieces to the puzzle, showing that what happened at my children's expense was not an isolated incident. To be thorough, I took photos of the invitations, the empty plates, and even small details from the party that could show how Ethan and Lily were treated differently. I knew that visual evidence could make a stronger impact if anyone doubted the story. Every piece I collected built a clearer picture of Vanessa's cruelty and her obsession with maintaining appearances, no matter who got hurt. Once I had gathered enough information, I reached out to a few more parents who had been quietly watching Vanessa's behavior over the years. They agreed to share their experiences and act as witnesses if needed. Together, we formed a small network, united not by revenge but by a desire to ensure that Vanessa's actions were seen for what they really were. It felt empowering to have allies who understood the situation and were willing to stand with me. By the end of the week, I had a full collection of evidence: texts, photos, statements, and social media posts. Each piece confirmed what I already knew in my heart: that Vanessa had deliberately humiliated my children and had done similar things to others in the past. But instead of feeling defeated, I felt determined. This evidence gave me power. It gave me a way to confront the situation calmly and strategically. I wasn't just acting out of anger. I was building a case to protect my children and ensure that Vanessa's cruelty would not go unnoticed. Once I had all the evidence I needed, I knew it was time to move from gathering facts to taking action. I didn't want to shout, fight, or cause a scene the way Vanessa had. I wanted something smarter, something that showed the truth without lowering myself to her level. That's when the idea came to me. Instead of confronting her directly, I would expose her by doing the exact opposite of what she expected. I would create an event that looked harmless, helpful, and generous, but underneath, it would reveal everything she had tried to hide. I started planning a charity fundraiser for children in need. I reached out to a few parents in our community who had supported me during the past week. They loved the idea and offered to help arrange everything, from decorations to donations. I made sure the theme was warm and simple, nothing overly fancy or showy, because the purpose was to help, not impress. I booked a local hall, arranged for speakers, and contacted a few businesses willing to sponsor the event. Everything came together smoothly, and people seemed excited. I created invitations and sent them out to the entire community, including members of Vanessa's social circle. I made sure to include the same guests who had attended her daughter's birthday party. I wanted them to see what real kindness looked like, and I wanted them to witness the difference between pretending to care and actually caring. I knew Vanessa wouldn't ignore an event like this, especially if people she wanted to impress were planning to show up. She valued attention too much to stay away. In the days leading up to the event, some parents reached out to me, telling me that Vanessa was curious, even annoyed, that I was suddenly hosting something so public. I could almost picture her confusion, wondering how a single mom like me could pull off an event that attracted the same crowd she tried so hard to impress. I didn't respond to any comments. I didn't need to. My silence only made her more curious. Behind the scenes, I carefully prepared everything. I printed out stories from parents who had been quietly mistreated by Vanessa. I created a display board that highlighted the importance of kindness toward children, featuring photos of those who had been excluded or hurt in similar situations. I didn't include Vanessa's name directly. There was no need for that. The truth had a way of exposing itself. As the night of the event approached, I felt a mix of nerves and anticipation. I wasn't doing this out of spite, but out of a desire to show people the truth without using the cruelty Vanessa had shown my children. I wanted her to feel the impact of her actions in a way she couldn't ignore, surrounded by the very people she tried so hard to impress. The plan was simple but powerful. Let Vanessa face her own reflection, not through insults or revenge, but through a gathering built on kindness, honesty, and the very values she lacked. The suspense grew as the evening drew closer, and even I wondered how Vanessa would react when she realized that her perfect image was about to crack in front of everyone she cared about impressing. The night of the fundraiser finally arrived. The hall was filled with parents, children, and neighbors, all gathered for a good cause. Ethan and Lily were smiling, playing with other kids, and helping hand out small treats. Seeing them happy and included lifted a weight off my shoulders. I took a deep breath and stepped up to give my speech, knowing this was the moment to show that kindness always matters more than cruelty. I began by talking about the importance of treating children with respect and care, and how small acts of exclusion or humiliation could leave lasting scars. I shared stories of children who had been overlooked, ignored, or humiliated, making sure each example highlighted real pain caused by thoughtless behavior. I didn't mention Vanessa by name, but the details I included were enough for those who had attended her daughter's birthday party to recognize what I was talking about. The audience listened quietly at first, but as I continued, I could see expressions changing. Some parents exchanged glances, realizing they had witnessed or experienced similar behavior from someone who valued appearances over people. The tension in the room grew, and I could feel Vanessa's eyes on me. She was still smiling, but it had changed. Her smugness was fading, replaced by a flicker of discomfort and surprise as she realized people were connecting the dots. I kept my voice calm and steady, focusing on the message rather than the person. I spoke about how cruelty might seem harmless when it's done quietly, but it always shows itself eventually, and how the way we treat others is the real measure of who we are. By the time I finished, there was a quiet murmur in the room. People were whispering to each other, pointing to things they had noticed before but hadn't wanted to acknowledge. Vanessa's confident facade had completely crumbled, and I could see her shrinking under the weight of her own actions. Ethan and Lily stood nearby, holding hands and watching the audience respond. Their eyes sparkled with pride and relief. For the first time that night, they felt fully included and valued. The children around them smiled and welcomed them, making the moment even more special. I glanced at my kids and felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that they were seeing that courage, honesty, and kindness could triumph over cruelty. By the end of the fundraiser, the shift in the room was clear. Guests had started turning away from Vanessa, no longer giving her the attention she so desperately sought. The focus had shifted entirely to celebrating those who showed true care and compassion. I had stayed calm, measured, and fair, but the message was unmistakable. Actions matter, and cruelty cannot hide forever. That night, my children learned a powerful lesson about resilience, and Vanessa learned that her actions had consequences, even without anyone saying her name aloud. By the time the fundraiser ended, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't experienced since the party at Vanessa's house. My goal had never been to humiliate her back, but to restore dignity for my children and show that cruelty has consequences. Watching the reactions of the guests, it was clear that Vanessa's carefully maintained image had been damaged. People who once admired her now looked at her differently, realizing that her perfection came at the expense of kindness and empathy. Ethan and Lily were beside me, their faces full of joy. They had been included, celebrated, and treated with respect all night. Seeing them laugh freely, helping hand out items, and enjoying every moment reminded me why I had acted. The relief and happiness on their faces were more rewarding than any sense of revenge could ever be. I knew in that moment that they understood a powerful lesson. Standing up for yourself and your values is always worth it. Vanessa tried to maintain a smile, but it was hollow. Her social circle had seen the truth, and whispers followed her wherever she went that night. She had underestimated the power of quiet strength and integrity. I didn't need to say anything more. The work I had done spoke louder than words, and the impact was clear for everyone to see. As we prepared to leave, Ethan and Lily were still giggling, talking about their favorite parts of the evening, and even sneaking extra pieces of cake. I watched them with tears in my eyes, proud of how strong and resilient they had been through everything. They had faced humiliation and exclusion before, but now they had seen the power of standing tall and staying true to oneself. I pulled them close and whispered, "Never let anyone humiliate you for being yourselves. Your worth is not determined by someone else's cruelty." I wanted them to carry that lesson in their hearts forever, to know that no one could take away their value or spirit. That single message summed up everything I hoped they would learn from this experience: courage, dignity, and the importance of kindness. Driving home, I reflected on everything that had happened. The party, the humiliation, the plan, and the fundraiser. It all came together to show a bigger truth. Cruelty may try to hide behind smiles and appearances, but it cannot stand against honesty, courage, and love. My children had learned resilience, and I had shown that justice could be achieved without becoming cruel in return. That night, the house was quiet, but inside me, I felt a sense of triumph. Not because Vanessa had lost face, but because my children had gained strength. Ethan and Lily had finally enjoyed a moment of pure happiness, and I had witnessed it. Their laughter and smiles were the real victory, and as I watched them savor their cake and celebrate, I knew that this experience had made our family stronger, closer, and unshakable.